During the 25th century, humanity would venture out into the stars to widen their space exploration and also use it as an opportunity to gather more resources that they otherwise might not have gained on Earth itself. As this new wave of technology went ahead, one type of vessel would be created that would be named as the Planet Cracker, which was designed to literally crack open the planet to extract all of the valuable resources that were inside. As this design concept went ahead, one ship would be created that would be labelled as the Saviour of Earth and its colonies, and would be the largest ship ever created for this role. This ship would be named the USG Ishimura, named after the astrophysicist Hideki Ishimura, who created the shock point drive that the Ishimura would also house, once again being the first vessel to do so. However, on a routine mission to extract the resources from the planet of Aegis 7, the Ishimura would encounter a terrifying new species that would decimate the crew of the ship and destroy everything valuable within it, leaving it abandoned in space, hoping that someone will come and save them from a horrible fate. So what is the story behind the USG Ishimura? What did it get up to on its travels? What happened when they got to Aegis 7? And what was their ultimate fate? Well, in today's video, we will explore the history of the iconic Planet Crack vessel, as well as the infestation that it housed. This is the story of the USG Ishimura and the Necromorph infestation from Dead Space. The year was 2446, and as mentioned, the Ishimura was created and hailed as the saviour of Earth and its colonies, as it was a symbol for how far humanity had come and what they could achieve with their technology. The vessel was created for one reason, and that was for mining and smelting entire planets and moons, and was also the first ship capable of the scan and catch technique, essentially harvesting mineral-rich asteroids utilising huge gravity tethers. This made its mining task incredibly efficient, as it was able to easily lock onto nearby asteroids and pull them immediately into the ship's collection bay to then start smelting, which is something so incredibly efficient and amazing to watch. However, on top of that, the ship was also used as a fully functioning medical research vessel with dedicated medical wings that would focus its efforts on researching virology, toxins, and genetics on a daily basis, making this whole ship something so legendary, and it's easy to understand how it got the name of Earth's Saviour. For 62 years after its creation, the Ishimura would go from planet to planet, asteroid cluster to asteroid cluster, gathering resources galore, and quickly gained the record of highest number of planet crack operations, doing 34, essentially one every 1.8 years. Thanks to all these jobs over the years, the ship now had heavily upgraded equipment, and most of its facilities were being regularly upgraded to fit with the constantly evolving technology that humanity had been developing over the years. Now being one of the oldest vessels within the Concordance Extraction Corporation, the Ishimura was still regarded as the pride and joy of their fleet, as it had the record to prove why it was great, as well as still being the largest planet cracker vessel out there. However, at this point in time of the ship's life, the CEC had heard a call out within the Aegis 7 colony about a red marker that they had found within the planet, and would call it Marker 3A. Hearing about this discovery, the CEC took immediate action and would go on to deploy the Ishimura to retrieve the marker and transport it back to Earth. News quickly spread about this marker being transported, and this would go on to reach the Church of Unitology, who believed that these markers were a sacred artifact and part of the divine alien race who had created humanity in the first place. With these markers, it would allow them to gain transformation and rebirth, and after they died, would be reunified in heaven thanks to the sacred markers. As the Church heard of this news, their extremely high influence within the CEC allowed them to get several high-ranking unitologists on board the Ishimura to try and get the marker back to Earth and the Church itself. As the ship did make it to Aegis 7, the commanding officer at the time, who was a devout unitologist from the Church, Captain Matthias, gave a no-fly order with the exception that the marker, all related data, and corpses should be moved to the Ishimura. As this went ahead and the marker was retrieved, the crew then began planet crack operations to cover up their true agenda of what they they were sent there to do in the first place. But during this whole operation, the Ishimura suddenly lost all contact with the entire colony of the planet below. Not knowing what was going on, the Ishimura crew tried desperately to re-establish contact once again, and finally it was re-established. However, what they found was horrifying. The whole colony had been slaughtered and was in desperate need of help. The Ishimura would then go on to contact another one of the mining teams to find out what was going on. However, no new information was recovered. All that was known was that the people of the colony had been killed by an unknown enemy or had been driven mad and killed each other. A few shuttles tried to escape and seek refuge on the Ishimura. However, as they navigated the asteroid fields, they would go on to be fired upon by the Ishimura's ADS cannons for violating Captain Mateus's orders of a no-fly zone. But despite that, 2 shuttles did make it to the vessel, with one being flown by Dig foreman Colin Barrow that would crash within the hangar bay, and the second would be flown by Gabe Weller, who crashed on the hull near the crew deck. But unknown to Barrow just before this, an infector had also boarded it and had fully infected his wife's corpse. Barrow, noticing this just before the crash, had then been killed by this entity and were going to crash land the shuttle as a result. And now because of this, as they had landed on the Ishimura, the infector, Barrow's wife, and most likely a newly infected Colin Barrow, would escape and charge into the ventilation system before security could arrive. As the infector ventured all over the ship through the ventilation system, it would find itself within the morgue, where it would go on to change at least 20 corpses into necromorphs to start their venture all around the ship. As the necromorphs went around, they would go on to slaughter the crew who were on their daily routines. At first, there weren't too many reported missing people spreading over the ship. However, word started increasing about the horrors that were lurking on the ship and killing people in different sectors. But although the danger was quite clear to all by this point, many of the staff had to just continue on as their jobs demanded them to do so, or the ship would become destabilized. But as they continued their jobs, they would not last long, as the ship quickly started to malfunction as people were being wiped out and not enough were left to monitor what the ship needed to continue on. Within mere hours, the ship was plunged into chaos and order was completely gone, with Nicole Brennan, a senior medical officer, stating nobody will tell us what's happening. There were some areas of the ship that were able to keep the creatures back, as they would go on to barricade and stopgap the area to hold them back anytime they tried to attack. This included the bridge, as well as the medical and mining decks, who would go on to hold out for the longest amount of time. For most of the ship, there was nothing they could do. The necromorphs attacked so suddenly, appearing from what seemed like nowhere, dropping down from the ceilings, out of the walls and small vents, and instantly killing anyone nearby. It didn't take long, but suddenly, on many of the decks, human presence was non-existent. Eventually though, the medical deck would be completely overwhelmed with all of the injured survivors fleeing from the terrifying creatures who had invaded their ship. But the medical staff knew there was nothing they could do to help them, and sadly, they had to barricade the injured outside to stop them breaking in as well. Eventually, the injured personnel would go on to be killed by the necromorphs, leaving no one left. But then, the creatures would turn to the medical deck and through sheer force would break their way in and slaughter all of the remaining medical staff. After that, the bridge was also overrun with the staff taking up their last stand with everything they could get their hands on, but there was no use. The vents allowed for easy access for the necromorphs as they found their way into it once again and slaughtered the crew that were housed there. The final crew was within the mining deck, where the wandering survivors would rally together to fight back and just try and survive. But once again, they were overwhelmed by the necromorphs and all eventually fell. The Ishimura was in utter chaos at this point, with next to no humans left on it. This was almost made worse thanks to the captain at the time, an utter marker loyalist, Captain Mateus, who would supposedly go on to sabotage the communication array to stop anyone else from interfering in his and the church's mission to bring the marker back to Earth. Terence Kine, another member of the church who had witnessed the horror of what had been happening and started questioning the overall nature of the church itself, learnt of Mateus's true plans and knew it was in his power to stop him and the church's ultimate goal. With this, Kine would go on to confront the captain to state that he believed the church had lied to them and brought about all of these events, and now with his mind made up, would go on to try and arrest the captain for what he had done and for still trying to protect the marker over saving his own crew. With the assistance of Sheik and White, Kyne would hold down Mateus and try to inject him with a sedative to make sure that he could not hurt himself or others around him, believing that everyone was against him as well as his beliefs and goal of getting the marker back to Earth to fulfill their holy journey. But Kyne made what looked like a mistake on the security cameras. When injecting Mateus, he would hit the captain's ocular cavity with the needle as the struggle pursued, and because of that, Mateus would quickly die. Attention went straight onto Kyne as the rest of the crew tried to arrest him as well for murder. But with this, Kyne would go on to escape their capture, stating he could not allow himself to be taken. But after this whole event, an unknown force completely jettisoned the ship's complement of escape shuttles with no one on board them, which would go on to leave the remaining crew trapped on board the Ishimura with absolutely no way out now. Kyne, still alive after all of that, knew that he had to take drastic action if they were to survive, or at least to stop the spread of the Necromorphs. Here he took to disengaging the ship's engines, which would go on to slow down the ship dramatically, triggering a slow descent into the planet below. The hope was that when the ship hit the atmosphere below, it would start burning the whole ship and would go on to kill everything with inside it, allowing humanity to be safe from coming into contact with the marker as well as the Necromorphs. But the chief security officer of the time, Elisa Vincent, would go on to find him after she had tried to save survivors such as Nicole Brennan from the attacks, and tried to reverse what he had done by attempting to stabilize the engines once again in a desperate hope to rescue the last remaining survivors on the ship. But sadly for Vincent, she was unsuccessful in her attempt and realized that she and the rest of the crew were doomed. In her last moments, she would go on to sacrifice herself to launch a distress signal into space itself. However, little did Vincent know that she was being manipulated by the marker into luring more people towards Aegis 7, with a hallucination of one of her teammates, the man who had fought alongside her all that time and eventually would go on to sacrifice himself to save her during the Necromorph attacks, that being the man known as Ramirez. Unfortunately for the ship known as the USG Kellyon, they would be the ones to hear this distress call, and in response to it would shock point directly to their location, hoping to hear more from them about what was going on. It became quite clear to this group that included Isaac Clarke, the boyfriend of senior medical officer Nicole Brennan, who was trapped on the ship, that something was not right within it. As things went horrifically wrong for the new crew that arrived on the ship, it became evident that Isaac, who was a previous ship engineer, was the one to help save this ship from a doomed fate. Every location of the ship, however, seemed covered in necromorph biomass, which was absolutely destroying the foundations of the ship and causing failures in the ship's life support, automated systems, and artificial gravity. So many systems were offline, and it became clear that the only way the ship could be scuttled was to once again disengage the engines and get the planet crack loads to pull the Ishimura into the planet like Kyne had planned as well. But as Isaac ventured over the ship repairing all of the necessary parts, it became clear that whilst it was in a terrible condition, it could in fact be saved. Eventually though, Isaac would go on to abandon the ship completely as he headed towards Aegis 7 with the marker in the executive shuttle, unknown of what the ship's fate was ultimately going to be. But as Isaac got to the planet of Aegis 7, he would go on to discover everything that had been going on the surface and in the Ishimura, as well as finding the collection of humans turned into the hive mind. Destroying the hive mind, Isaac would escape the colony just before it was to be destroyed completely. As the colony of Aegis 7 blew up thanks to Isaac dropping a whole continent on it, the Ishimura was thrown out of orbit and sent further into deep space. With that all wrapped up, the Earth's government didn't want to fully disclose what had happened in the events prior and stated that the ship had been lost and destroyed by terrorists in a vicious attack. They would then go on to commemorate its honor with the CEC, and for years would go on to make sure that the public never knew of what happened inside of it, because if they did, it would only turn to widespread panic and utter chaos. Floating through the Aegis system, it looked like the Ishimura's fate was coming to an end, and it was just a wreckage of a ship now. However, a group of illegal miners within the area known as the Magpies, led by Jessica Lee and Stegen Schneider, would go on to witness the Ishimura drifting by as they were transporting their own materials. Being transported to their position, the Magpies would go on to stabilize the vessel with gravity tethers and went on to board it, finding that the inside of the ship was in total ruin. Not only had it been destroyed inside by the previous events, but its entire hull and decks had been destroyed even further by by the asteroids striking it constantly. Oxygen was pretty much depleted due to this damage, and the shock point drive was severely damaged along with many of the other internal systems. With the red marker destroyed now as well, the Necromorphs who had infested the ship had now just turned into soupy sludge-like materials, and with that, quarantine lockdowns were in full effect all over the ship because of the corruption that had coated all the walls. The Magpies saw this as an opportunity to travel through the ship and take any equipment that was seen as valuable and useful to them, but this would ultimately be their downfall. Traveling through the ship, a few of the crew would go on to discover several shards of the destroyed red marker that were on the outside of the hull, and immediately on its discovery, the ship fell into chaos once again. Maliek, one of the Magpie members, immediately assaulted his fellow salvager after discovering the fate of the marker shards, and because of it was confined away from everyone. Another member quickly after that, named Venshif, also went mad because of the marker and attacked another member named Schneider and would be killed because of it. This all came to a head when Julia Copland, assisted by Maliek, would go on to leave the Ishimura with a shard of the marker with the plan to take it to the Earth government to make a deal with them and betray the other Magpies. But that wasn't the end of the events, as the Earth Defense Force, as well as the secret agents known as the Oracles, would start to close in on the Magpies' position, and as they did, the Necromorphs suddenly came back into being and started to reanimate all over the ship. As they did, they would go on to attack all of the Magpies on board, slaughtering all of them, all except one, that being Schneider, who had become the sole survivor. Under the influence of the marker, Schneider would go on to trick the EDF squad into landing within the Ishimura's cargo bay, where they would be instantly slaughtered by the Necromorphs, leaving no one left alive. Whilst this was going on, Schneider attempted to escape. However, the Oracles were still in hot pursuit of him, which ended in a confrontation outside of the ship. As this happened, a new hive mind got involved, and because of it, Schneider was able to get back inside and escaped the Oracles, leaving them to be slaughtered by the Necromorphs and the new hive mind. Schneider would then go on to recover some of their weapons and gear that had been left on the ground after the attacks, and would head to the Oracle's stealth shuttle, escaping from the Ishimura and alerting the Earth Gov about the new location of the ship before shocking out to an unknown destination. It was said that the Earth Gov shocked in not long after all of this and would go on to retrieve the Ishimura once again, cleaning it out from any threats, and would take it back to Titan Station, colloquially known as the Sprawl. 3 years had now passed, and the engineer who had once repaired the Ishimura from the Necromorph's destruction, Isaac Clarke, found himself on Titan Station, where he would go on to find the USG Ishimura docked there by the Earth Gov, who were performing a thorough cleanup and refit operation within the ship to essentially make it clear of all evidence of a Necromorph infestation. This was doable thanks to the fact that the Magpies had taken or lost the marker shards, and now infestation was just sludge once again. However, that was to all change once again, as another marker named Site 12 marker was located within the Sprawl, and once again it didn't take long before the infestation started to take place. As Isaac went on to escape from the area, the Necromorph presence on board the Ishimura grew, as they were going to start stalking the Sprawl technicians, which would go on to cause mass paranoia and panic throughout all of the cleanup crews. Eventually the Necromorphs would once again take over the Ishimura and wipe out the crews who had restored most of the ship at that point. But later, as an extremely uneasy Isaac returned to the Ishimura to try and use its gravity tether to reconnect the Sprawl's government sector back to the station, he would go on to discover that the ship's repairs were indeed incomplete, and he had to now journey to the engineering deck to restore the gravity centrifuge. After another grueling and terrifying experience venturing through the actively repairing ship that had remnants of the destruction from when he was first in it, Isaac eventually would go on to escape using the newly instated escape pods put in by the Earth Gov in their cleanup attempt, and when leaving the ship, the station of the Sprawl would go on to explode after Isaac's actions to tackle the Necromorphs, and with that explosion it would go on to completely destroy the Ishimura that had still housed the Necromorph infection. The legendary mining ship of the Ishimura was now completely gone. Its legacy as the biggest planet cracker ship that had the best track record was still being pushed out on many of the people of Earth and its colonies. days. However, its true legacy would be remembered by the horrific events during the year of 2508 and then later in 2511, where its crew would be slaughtered by the Necromorphs made by the Markers and driven completely mad along the way, with most taking their own lives. It would be one of the darkest moments in all of humanity's history, and without the help of the ex-ship engineer Isaac Clarke, they could have been completely wiped out on all of their colonies and on Earth. Maybe one day the Earth Gov will bring back a new version of the USG Ishimura to honor the one they had lost back in the day, or maybe the ship will just go down as a legend, or something of a tale to motivate humanity further and to encourage more technological advancements. But for now, this has been the dark tale of the USG Ishimura and how it became infested by the horrifying Necromorphs. I want to say a huge thank you for watching this video, and please do let me know if you'd like to see more Dead Space lore, as I have loved diving back into this game once again thanks to the remake that just released on the making of this video. I also want to say a huge thank you to my patrons for allowing me to make videos like this on a regular basis, including my small fishes, my big fishes, Christopher, Last Persona User, Arto Krem and Greg, my YouTube channel Wise Ones, Fiery Italian, Ico the Wolf and Sith Lord 906, my sharks Wow Such Gaming, Jason X117, Redbeard and Rondacy, and my Megalodons, Sinus, Hazy Thoughts, and Chernobyl Stalker. But that is all for now. Thank you for watching again, and if you want more lore videos, check out my playlists below. Use my G Fuel link and code WISEFISHYT for up to 30% off of your orders, and please do like, comment, and subscribe to help get these videos out there. And with all of that said, thanks again for watching, and I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.